Welcome to Stuff Works Explained, a channel that explores different activities, projects, and our focus has mainly been on what is happening in Africa. In today's video, we'll be talking about conflict in Mozambique. And before we continue, I request you to subscribe to this channel if you have not, like uh, the various videos that you have done, watch uh, videos on various topics. Uh, Also click the notification bell so that whenever we upload a new video, you are notified. In today's video, we'll be looking at the conflict that has been happening in Mozambique, northern province of Cabo Delgado, how that conflict has evolved, and the efforts that are made to stem the conflict. Since 2017, Mozambique, north province of Cabo Delgado, has been in chaos. This is after a terror group which is locally known as Al-Shabaab, although it has no connection with Al-Shabaab in Somalia. This group started attacks in the region and has committed heinous acts like beheadings, abductions, destruction of property, schools, and hospitals, and this has led to humanitarian disaster. It is estimated that since the fighting broke out, more than 3,000 people have died. This includes 1,500 civilians, although the true number is expected to be much higher. At least 1 million people are now displaced in the provinces of Cabo Delgado, Nampula, Niassa, Sofala, and Zambezia, all as a result of this violence and insecurity. The violence has also had serious economic effects. It has destroyed the livelihoods of many in the regions. It has also threatened the development of natural gas fields that would strengthen the country's suffering economy. Fortunately, the militants are now on their back foot after the Mozambique neighbors sent troops in July 2021 to counter the terror group. One of the countries that have provided this is Rwanda, and then we have the SADC. But the problems still continue. The region's problems are deep-rooted. They need sustained engagement to stave off the violence and advance peace. So in this video, you'll be exploring the conflict in Mozambique's northern province of Cabo Delgado, how it started, and also how it has evolved. Cabo Delgado is the northmost province of Mozambique. It borders Tanzania in the north and Indian Ocean in the east. The province has 17 districts. The region is an ethnic stronghold of the Makonde tribe. Makua and Mwani are the leading ethnic minorities. Pemba is the capital of the province. Other important cities include Montepuez and Masmboa de Praia. About 22% of Cabo Delgado's population also speak Portuguese, which is the language that is spoken in Portugal. Portugal is the country that colonized Mozambique. Mozambique is a majority Christian country. However, two northern provinces have an Islamic majority. For example, Niassa has 61% Muslims. Cabo Delgado has 54% Muslim. In Cabo Delgado, only 3 districts have a Catholic or Christian minority. We have Maidumbe, which has 67%, and Mwenda, 54%. We have Namuno, 61%. This district is located in the south of Cabo Delgado. Two other districts that have significant Catholic populations, we have Nagande, 42%, and 36% are Muslim in the north, and Shure, we have 44% Muslim and 42% Catholic in the south, whilst 12 districts have Muslim majorities, including Pemba, which together with the other 4 has more than 90% Muslim. Coastal administrative post all over have 75% Muslim. So region is important as far as understanding conflict in Mozambique is concerned. When you analyze this conflict, you find that region uh, is a key factor. The attacks in this region has mainly targeted five isolated districts: Masimboa, Di Praia, Macomia, Nagande, Palma, and Kaisanga. These districts, except Nagande, are coastal areas. They overlook the Mozambican Channel, and Macomia has a large plateau area that stretches into the interior. Although Masimboa de Praia is the birthplace of this violent group, it was in Macomia that the group launched most of the attacks. It is noteworthy that in this district, most of the population are Mwani and Mokwe communities which practice Islamic religion. How did all this start? Two writers, Amal El Kasafi Suleiman and Yusuf Kitenge, in a paper which is titled Terrorist Insurgency in Northern Mozambique, Context, Analysis and Spillover Effects of the Tanzania, observed that in October 2017, an armed group attacked 3 police stations in the town of Masimboa de Praia in the region of Cabo Delgado. They killed 17 people, including police officers and a community leader. Some days later, the army arrested the suspects in retaliation to the attack, but the violence continued in the region. The targets of the attacks slowly evolved from police and government installation to include civilians and representatives of international oil and gas companies operating in the area. The origins and ideological underpinnings of the movement, commonly called Al-Shabaab or Al-Harla Sunnah wal Jamaa, are not clear. It is worthy mentioning that the name Al-Shabaab, in the reference to the word youth in Arabic, is not related to the Al-Shabaab in Somalia. There are potential links with Islamic states, IS, have been evoked, particularly after ISIS publicly recognized in mid-2019 links with Al-Shabaab in Cabo Delgado. However, differences in the target and mode of operation suggest that Al-Shabaab remains a locally driven movement. Foreign interventions, if confirmed, only came later when ISIS tried to take over the insurgency for the international media exposure and recognition. Analysts also link references to ISIS with foreign interest to legitimize international military action. Joseph Hanlon, a senior research fellow in the Department of International Development at the London School of Economics, sees the root of Cabo Delgado conflict as a complex mix of history, ethnicity, religion, and also sees the war as mainly influenced or fueled by poverty, growing inequality, and resource scarce. On the east, Cabo Delgado borders the Mozambican Channel, and this region is occupied by Mwani community for centuries. The people are Muslims, fishers, they are traders, and also they are farmers. There is an extensive trade along the coast with historical links to Zanzibar. West of this coastal strip is Mweda Plateau, the area that was occupied by Makonde in the 1700s and 1800s to probably avoid the slave traders and those diseases and colonizers. The Makonde also have link to Tanzania, and independence in Tanzania in 1963 had strong influence of these people. Frelimo, one of the popular parties in the country, was founded in 1962, and it began its war for independence in 1965. Makonde were very crucial in this party, and also there was strong involvement of the Mwani tribe. After independence, Mwani argued that they were marginalized as the Makonde in Frelimo gained power, and key Makonde's liberation fighters then became the rich people or the oligarchs of Cabo Delgado. Many more Makondes than Mwani received compensation or pensions as liberation fighters, and Makonde were accused of grabbing coastal land and businesses. So according to John Hanlon, that's how the conflict that we're witnessing today started, the antagonism between two communities, Makonde and Mwani, on the role that they played in fight for independence. Joseph Hanlon also notes that outside Makonde's area, Cabo Delgado became a forgotten province with low levels of literacy and education and high levels of poverty. However, from the 1990s, Cabo Delgado proved to be one of the richest provinces in natural resources. Now, most of the province is allocated for mining, exploration, and exploitation, which in law takes precedence over farmers and existing occupants. Many of the licenses, mining licenses, were grabbed by the Frelimo elite. Thousands of farmers and fishermen were pushed off their land, and the artisanal miners, particularly those mining for rubies, were evicted, beaten, and even killed. Young people with basic education could not get jobs, while the gas and mining company crews and the Makonde Frelimo elite became wealthy with relatively luxurious cars and houses. In Masboa de Praia, for example, young men with basic literacy said they were educated and would not do the back-breaking work done by their illiterate parents, including farming with only a hoe or catching fish while standing on the beach with a net. Many migrated to towns and became itinerant traders and street sellers. They watched gas workers drive by 4x4, which never stopped to support them by buying their goods. Their anger was aimed at foreigners, mainly people from south of Mozambique, who are believed to be the league with Frelimo in Maputo and taking their jobs. Joseph Hannon notes that marginalization of people, especially the young people, has contributed in fueling this conflict to some extent. As a January 2021 survey of people who fled Masiboa da Praia showed that many young men joined the insurgents in hope of gaining jobs. Historically, the population is not in favor of the government, and the complaint is that young people are excluded from jobs because they are said to support the opposition. Abuse by the police and army also has increased support for the insurgency. Joseph Hanlon concludes that when looking at the Cabo Delgado's conflict, it is important to take into account this violence and the genuine belief that of many people that elites want them dead, and they are acting to defend their lives and those of their families. There's also infighting between government agencies. Attempts by the government to hide and downplay the seriousness of the conflicts in this region has also failed it in a way. The events in Cabo Delgado were initially treated as merely criminal actions, which were to be dealt by the police. As the war escalated, much of the fighting on the government side was done by the paramilitary riot police, which is under the Ministry of Interior. Interior Ministry contracted private military wing, Wagner Group, and then brought in the South African DAG. There have been major conflicts between the Defense Force and the Ministry of the Interior as a result. For example, the army refused to cooperate with Wagner Group. There's a critical strategic difference between the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Defense. The Interior Ministry believes that the riot police can bring insurgents under control relatively quickly with more outside support, including more air cover and supporting provided by the DAG, better equipment and more training. The Defense Ministry has a long-term strategy based on building a much larger, modern military force with substantial increases in equipment and training from outside. So this conflict, this infighting between the government agencies to some extent has failed this conflict, because if there was coordination, proper coordination, this insurgency could have been brought into order within a relatively short time. But this and also lack of support from the population, because population feels that the government is against them, has failed that. Human rights violation and also foreign intervention. The government has repeatedly ignored the human rights violation by soldiers and police. This, according to analysts, has pushed local people to side with the insurgents. The police and army have been responsible for serious human rights abuses, ranging from beatings and killings of civilians to setting up roadblocks simply to collect money. This has turned local people against the armed forces and increased the number of recruits for the insurgents. Both sides appear to be trying to force people to flee, and virtually the entire population from the war zone is now registered as IDPs, internally displaced persons. Frelimo has increasingly appealed for the international military and humanitarian support, but on narrow terms that ensures Frelimo remains in control. It does not want the South African Development Community SADC, EU or UN peacekeeping missions involvement, as they are inevitably accompanied by political assessment which will point to failure to redress grievances and human rights violations. So they don't want these bodies to be involved directly because of the political assessment that will be done, and those political assessment will point to Frelimo's failures. Instead, Frelimo wants to negotiate semi-secret agreements with individual governments and private military contractors to provide support to build Mozambique's own military. We have seen contraction of Russians Wagner Group. We have seen DAG from South Africa. We have seen calling up of Rwandan army, where a contingent of 1,000 soldiers was brought to country, and it has done a lot as far as quelling these insurgencies is concerned. There have been reports that greater strides have been made as far as quelling this insurgency. Also, SADC, South African Development Community, deployed 1,500 troops, and this is as a result of these negotiations, what John Handon is calling semi-secret agreements with individual government and private military contractors. So Mozambique does not want to go through SADC, EU, and UN peacekeeping missions. It wants to have these agreements with individual countries for the purposes of helping it to quell this insurgency. The government wants humanitarian agreements with individual UN agencies to support the hundreds of thousands of displaced persons. Frelimo and the government hope that by representing themselves as the victims of a global enemy, the Islamic terrorists, and a player in the new East-West Cold War, they will attract support without being closely scrutinized. They intend to bring the war to an end within a few years while maintaining the rent system. However, the country's history suggests that without dealing with many grievances, they will fail. For now, the worst of the violence in Cabo Delgado has been brought down, subsided, but for the lasting peace, security forces must be backed by broader efforts in short, medium term, and also in long term. Perhaps one of the notable assistance that may come in the way of Mozambique is from the United States. US has named Mozambique as one of the priority countries in the Global Fragility Act GFA implementation. Global Fragility Act GFA is a new US approach to conflict prevention and stabilization. GFA aims to reduce violence globally by elevating peace building and conflict prevention as a pillar of US foreign policy and development assistance. Implementing this innovative strategy is more urgent than ever in Mozambique and other countries. Other countries which have been identified as far as this implementation is concerned include Haiti, Libya, Papua New Guinea, Little West Africa. This This act will dedicate $1.2 billion over the next 5 years in prevention of conflict and peace building in countries. So Mozambique, as one of the priority countries, has been identified, and this assistance will go far in assisting this country to stem out insurgency. But most of the efforts, since we have seen that this conflict is the causes of this conflict, I mean, revolve around religion, revolve around grievances where people feel that they are marginalized. It will take more than just outside assistance. The immediate priority should be stemming military advances by the military while also addressing the dire humanitarian situation. As reports indicate, these stemming military advances there has been a success, especially with coming in of Rwandan's military assistance and SADC deployment of troops. Now, in UN agencies need to come in and address the humanitarian situation where so many people have been displaced. There's also need for the international community to recognize that there is no equivalence between the government and the militants. Although the government may be accused of some atrocities, the international community also need to recognize that there's a government which is democratically elected and which has a responsibility and right to deploy forces if necessary to defend its territory. The international community should also address the government, should also press the government to address the legitimate economic and political grievances in Cabo Delgado. As you have seen, the insurgency has been decades in making, stemming back to at least in the beginning of the country in 1975. The rich region has made one of the country's poorest provinces with large illicit economy. That's partly due to the developmental challenges common to Africa, and partly the government being distracted previously by years of civil war, and partly to exploitative government policy. Frelimo generals from the liberation era, mainly from the Makonde tribe, has used their connection to dominate Cabo Delgado's business. Corruption is rampant by local officials and cahoots with national officials, trading illicit gems, wildlife, and drugs, as Cabo Delgado has become a major international heroin transit point. The national government forcibly removed artisan miners, as you have seen, from ruby fields in Motepuz in 2014 to the advantage of the commercial interest. This tired unrest. This could have played a very big role in this insurgency. Maputo is here to address the challenges of relocation and local employment that has come with massive development of natural gas infrastructure in Cabo Delgado. So government has to be pressed to bring to an end to solve these crises where people feel marginalized. The government should better communicate with the people of Delgado. As we know, effective communications are a critical element in stemming militancy. Since this insurgency erupted in 2017, the government has spoken of it as a solely foreign-driven Islamist-centered terrorist movement. President has routinely spoken of defeating the terrorists. The government is right that the militancy involves foreign fighters. It contains an element of Islamist radicalism and utilizes terrorist tactics. However, legitimate local grievances are the fuel to the fire, and the government should speak to the economic and political concerns of those in Cabo Delgado. In addressing the humanitarian crisis, it should amplify and condemn atrocities being committed by the militants. Of course, words must be followed by action, but step one is speaking to the crisis as an element that has rooted in the province and has affected people. The Cabo Delgado crisis is an opportunity to address the broader challenges in the country and also help in improving local governance. Most observers believe that the formula for peace in Cabo Delgado and also elsewhere in Mozambique requires greater autonomy so that all people in the country feel that their interests are represented. If the government implements decentralization and more participation, transparency, and accountable governments, which is combined by effective security operations, with time, insurgency in Cabo Delgado will be diffused and all the Mozambican will benefit. So that's how the conflict has evolved in this country. It is one of the worst humanitarian crises in the continent of Africa, which analysts feel that should be addressed as soon urgently. So we have been looking at in the previous videos we have looked at conflicts in other parts of Africa. We looked at 10 conflicts that need to be resolved quickly, and Mozambique, Cabo Delgado was one of them. So we hope that soon this conflict will be resolved, so that an area that has a lot of potential in terms of economic development of Mozambique as a country gets peace, and the people in this area get to benefit from the resources that are in their country. So thank you for watching this video. I encourage you to watch more videos in the channel. Leave a comment, like, and also if you have not subscribed to this channel, I request you to do so and watch other videos that we have made. So thank you and welcome for more videos.